Meg, my mom said she wants to talk to you about the inheritance. Make sure to give her a call, Mike told me while I was still grappling with the loss of my father, who had just passed away a few days ago. Why would your mother be involved in my father's inheritance? I asked, confused. I don't know, just make sure to call her by tomorrow, he replied. When did Mike start to change like this? My name is Meg. I'm 48 years old and currently working at a local company. I had once quit my job to focus on parenting, but after our son Jack grew a bit older, I returned to work. My husband, Mike, was my colleague when we first started out, and we're the same age. We got married at 22, and a year later, we were blessed with our son Jack. I've spent nearly half my life with Mike, but lately, I've noticed more and more things about him that frustrate me. When Jack turned 3, Mike suddenly announced that he was quitting his job. When I asked why, he expressed his dissatisfaction, saying, "I'm frustrated with my boss. I should be earning a higher salary." It seemed like he was influenced by the wave of job changes happening around him at the time. Mike is easily swayed by others, and this flaw became glaringly apparent then. After changing jobs, things didn't go as he had hoped. Although his salary increased slightly, he started complaining again, saying, "I don't fit in at work and I don't find it interesting." Our workplace had once felt vibrant when we both worked there, but over time, that spark seemed to fade. The thing that makes Mike the happiest now is visiting his parents' home just a 30-minute drive away. At first, I joined him, but as these visits became more frequent, I often stayed home with Jack. The area where my in-laws live is filled with Mike's old friends from his student days, and since he has few relationships at work, I feel he relies on them heavily. I've suggested many times, instead of always going to your parents' house, let's go out as a family or spend time with Jack, but he refuses, saying, "Jack doesn't feel close to me." We have hardly any memories of going out as a family. Instead, outings with my parents and Jack have become more frequent. My father had made smart investments in real estate and worked as a manager, so he had some financial stability. My parents would usually come to pick us up, and we would go out together. I sometimes wondered if my in-laws weren't interested in Jack, but it seemed they prioritized their son over their grandson. We were never specially invited or made to feel welcome. This lifestyle continued until Jack entered middle school. As he grew older, our outings with my parents naturally decreased, but it seemed to sadden my father the most. My father even bought a new high-rise apartment in our area, hoping to keep those family moments alive. When I asked my father why he chose that apartment, he happily replied, "From there, you can see the fireworks." He remembered how much Jack had enjoyed the fireworks festival before and thought that having a view of the fireworks would make Jack happy to visit. By the time my parents moved into the high-rise apartment, Jack was already in high school. When he heard about my father's plan, Jack was thrilled and eagerly visited to watch the fireworks. From then on, it became a cherished tradition to gather there every year on the day of the fireworks festival. My father would often say, "My dream is to enjoy the fireworks while drinking with Jack in the future," and my mother would smile, saying, "That's really sweet." Unfortunately, my mother, who had been in poor health for some time, passed away not long after. Even though we were somewhat prepared, the loss was still incredibly hard to bear. Despite this, we continued our visits to my father on the day of the fireworks festival. When Jack turned 21, we shared our first drink together during the festival, and my father was overjoyed. That was the only time Mike joined us for the fireworks, and the next time he saw my father was at my mother's funeral. Mike is still easily influenced by those around him. If he hears that someone has done a big cleaning, he immediately starts tidying up, or if he hears about a fun visit to a child-friendly spot, he suddenly wants to go, despite rarely showing interest in such activities before. I believe that, deep down, Mike is a good person, and I've lived with a certain sense of security, accepting this side of him. However, everything changed. When my father suddenly collapsed at work and passed away, his colleagues immediately called an ambulance, but he was gone by the time they reached the hospital. It was a heart attack. Had he collapsed at home, it might have taken days before anyone found him, so collapsing in public may have been a small mercy. Mike and Jack rushed over, but it was too late. Despite our deep sorrow, we somehow managed to hold the funeral. During the reception, someone approached me. "Meg, are you okay?" It was my mother-in-law, Jane. Although we weren't very close, her concern made my heart feel a bit lighter. But then my father-in-law, Kevin, said something that left me stunned. That high-rise condo is in an area slated for redevelopment soon. so its market value is still rising. If you sell it now, you could get a considerable amount, he said, matter-of-factly. I stood there, speechless as Jane chimed in. You're the only one inheriting, aren't you, Meg? That's good for you. Now you won't have to worry about money for a while. I hadn't even begun to consider the inheritance yet, still overwhelmed by grief. It seemed they were trying to express concern, but their focus on the money felt deeply inappropriate. Struggling to contain my anger, I replied, I'll think about that more carefully later, and asked my in-laws to leave. Later, Mike asked, is that apartment really worth so much? My father had mentioned redevelopment plans before, explaining that a large commercial facility was set to be built, along with new apartments. But I was disheartened that Mike would bring this up just days after my father's funeral. Then, a few days later, Mike said, Meg, my mom wants to talk to you about inheritance matters, so give her a call. I couldn't help but ask, why would your mother be involved in my father's inheritance? I felt irritated, wondering if our previous conversation hadn't been clear enough. Mike's words only added to my annoyance. I don't know, just make sure to call her by tomorrow, he had said. The next day, I couldn't bring myself to call Jane, but she contacted me first, out of the blue. So you're selling that property, right? Should I talk to a real estate agent I know? She asked, even though I hadn't mentioned anything about selling it. Acting quickly is best. If you need anything, I'm always here to help, she added before abruptly hanging up. When I told Mike about the call after he came home, he asked, what do you want to do? Are you not going to live in that apartment? I replied, the distance from the station is a problem. Selling might be the best option. Despite my clear decision, Jane kept asking, haven't you sold it yet? Should I introduce you to a real estate agent? I firmly told her, I have a friend who's in real estate, so it's okay. Don't worry, this is something I should decide, so please don't interfere. But Jane insisted, what are you talking about? We're family, let's help each other, and started calling me frequently, even though we had barely been in touch before. Thinking that deciding to sell would finally quiet Jane, I reached out to a real estate company run by a friend to discuss the sale. After informing Jane and Mike that evening that I had decided to put it on the market, the frequent calls from Jane temporarily stopped, giving me a moment of relief. 3 months passed and I received news that a buyer had been found, likely at a price beyond our expectations. That night, when Mike came home, he suddenly asked, so how much did it sell for? I tried to hide my surprise. I lied, it's not confirmed yet. It hasn't sold at all. An uneasy silence filled the room. The next day, while I was enjoying a leisurely holiday, the intercom suddenly rang. When I checked, I saw my in-laws standing there. I asked Mike, your parents are here? Did something happen? He let them into the house, and Jane handed me a stack of documents. As I glanced through them, I realized they were divorce papers. Confusion washed over me as Jane began to speak. Meg, how long do you plan to rely on Mike? The reason he frequently returns to his parents' house is because he's exhausted from living with you. Can't you see it's time for a divorce? I was stunned into silence. Still in shock, I turned to Mike. What is this about, Mike? Do you feel the same way? He simply nodded. This was the first I had heard of this, and I couldn't accept it. Mike continued, after the divorce, if we split the assets, we should both be able to live on our own for a while. My in-laws seemed to agree, adding, the property has been sold. We heard from an acquaintance in real estate that with that amount, you won't have to worry about living expenses for a while, even after the divorce. I was dumbfounded. What on earth was going on? This was completely unbelievable. Amidst the chaos, Mike began to fill out the divorce papers, showing a clear intent to proceed. It seemed as if my in-laws had influenced his decision, seeing the sale of the property as an opportunity for financial gain. The thought that Mike might also be looking forward to the asset division was painful. I had to remind myself that inherited property is not subject to division in a divorce. I quickly grabbed the divorce papers and filled out the necessary information. I'll file these, I told Mike. He replied that it would save him the trouble. Also, I'm moving out, so you can stay here, he added. He left a note saying he'd come back later for his larger belongings, took his suitcase, and left with my in-laws. With his departure, there was nothing more to say. When I reported the situation to my son Jack over the phone, he was even more outraged than I was. After some deep thought, he suggested, can you hold off on the divorce for a bit? Although he didn't explain his reasons, it seemed like he was planning something, so I agreed to wait for further details. A week later, Jack came home and began explaining with a set of photos. This is what they were planning, he said, showing me images of my in-laws' house. The house, now unrecognizable, looked completely new and modern. I was taken aback. According to Jack, these photos were taken by a friend of his from university who lived nearby. This friend had overheard my in-laws bragging about their new house and had taken these photos as a result of a bit of sleuthing. Jack then showed me more pictures, including ones of Mike with an unfamiliar woman. Apparently, Jack's friend had followed Mike and managed to capture these incriminating photos. The images showed them on dates and entering my in-laws' house together. I was stunned. Mike was having an affair, and his frequent visits to his parents' house were actually rendezvous with this woman. My in-laws had clearly noticed this relationship. Jack added, my friend overheard that this woman and dad might be getting married soon. That's why they built the new house. I was stunned by Jack's friend's initiative. With such evidence, pursuing a divorce and a claim for damages was definitely on the table. I decided not to give Mike any of the proceeds from the sale of the Tower Mansion and set out to find a lawyer. The following weekend, I received a call from Mike. What do you mean you haven't filed the divorce papers yet? His irritation was palpable. I've been busy and just haven't had the chance to get there, I replied. How did you find out? Are you trying to remarry someone? His anger flared. What are you talking about? Hurry up and file the divorce papers, or I'll proceed with a lawyer myself. It seemed my question had hit a nerve. Don't worry, I said calmly. I've already hired a lawyer. His tone shifted abruptly. A lawyer? For what? Yes, I confirmed. Actually, I'm considering filing for damages. His panic was evident. Damages for what? He stammered. For the affair, I said. Were you cheating every time you went back to your parents? How long has this been going on? He hesitated before responding. No. That was just a high school classmate. She said she got divorced and moved back home. It's only been about 2 years. 2 years? A high school friend, huh? Thanks for letting me know, I replied. Mike then tried to be defiant. Yes, just for 2 years, but I'm planning to marry her now. There'll be a problem if you don't finalize the divorce papers quickly. My parents agree, so please hurry up. Are you sure you're okay talking so freely? I asked, my voice steady. I asked him, so, after the divorce, we'll split the assets, right? He scoffed and replied, we'll divide everything after the divorce. I'm already working with a lawyer on that. Even after splitting the proceeds from the Tower Mansion, there will still be a significant amount left. So the damages for the affair will be minimal. His reasoning left me struggling to understand. So you rebuilt your parents' house for that reason? Yeah, he said with a smirk. The loan is in my name, but I plan to pay it off immediately after the divorce. I laughed at his statement. Do you really believe that? The mansion was sold, but that money won't be divided. He looked confused. What do you mean? Didn't you or your parents know that? I said, shaking my head. It's surprising you rushed to rebuild the house. I checked the time and decided to move the conversation forward. Mike, you're at your parents' house now, right? Yeah, he replied, sounding puzzled. Someone should be arriving soon. I informed him, hinting for him to check the intercom. I had arranged for Jack to visit Mike with a lawyer. Jack might have things he wanted to say to his father, and since I preferred not to meet him myself, I had Jack handle the matter. Jack casually agreed to address the damages claim, treating it like a routine task. I don't care much about the divorce itself since I don't have many memories with Dad. Jack's voice came through the phone. But if you try to take away Grandma's inheritance from Mom, I won't forgive you. I have far more memories with Grandpa, Grandma, and Mom than I ever had with Dad. Hearing Jack's words brought tears to my eyes. Following that, I pursued damages for the affair from Mike, and the divorce was officially settled. The woman involved in the affair, who had been thought to be single, ended up being sued for suspected marriage fraud. Jack's friend informed me that the newly built family home was already on the market. Mike hasn't quit his job, but he's likely moving into either the unfinished place or an old company housing, an option that has long been plagued by a bad reputation and interpersonal issues. At least he has a place to live, so I hope he focuses on his work with the funds from selling the Tower Mansion. With the inheritance from my father, I bought a new apartment in a desirable location. It even has a view of the fireworks. Jack mentioned he'd bring his girlfriend to watch them with us next summer. I'm grateful for how strong and mature my son has become over time, and I find myself imagining attending his wedding in the future.